Hello and welcome to the Violin Geek Podcast. I'm your host, Laurel Thomsen, and today I'm excited to share an interview I did recently with classical violinist and fiddler Maura Shawn Scanlin. Her band Rakish has recently released a new album called Counting Down the Hours, and we're going to be chatting about and listening to some of those tracks during the episode. I hope you'll check out the whole album. And whether you come from more of a classical background or a fiddle background or maybe somewhere in between, Maura shares some great tips for how she's been able to effectively bridge that gap between the different styles she plays in and to feel more freedom, ease, and joy in her playing. Before we dive into the interview and meet Maura, I wanted to share a little bit from her biography at maurashawnscanlin.com, and all the links and websites I talk about will be in the show notes. Maura completed her master's degree in violin performance at the Yale School of Music. And prior to that, she completed a bachelor's degree at the New England Conservatory. Maura's classical collaborations with various ensembles have led her to the Fischoff International Chamber Music Competition, the Yellow Springs Chamber Music Competition, and the Banff Chamber Music Residency. In addition to classical music, Maura also enjoys performing and collaborating with other musicians in a variety of non-classical styles, ranging from traditional folk to contemporary improvisatory music. Maura is a two-time U.S. National Scottish Fiddling Champion and a winner of the Glenfiddich Fiddling Championship in Perthshire, Scotland. Maura has performed at venues and festivals across North America and the United Kingdom, and she tours regularly with a 5-piece contemporary folk band called Pumpkin Bread, her Irish duo project Rakish, which we'll be hearing more about, her string quartet Rasa, and she is also a member of the contemporary Scottish outfit the Bywater Band. Please enjoy this lovely conversation I had with Maura, and I'll see you on the other side. Hello, Maura Shawn Scanlin, and welcome to the Violin Geek Podcast. How's it going today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be here.
You are welcome. And where are we talking to you today from?
I just moved to Arlington, Massachusetts. So that's where I'm coming to you from, just right outside Boston.
Awesome. And you've been in the area for a while?
Yeah. I moved to Boston proper to go to college at the New England Conservatory. So that was when I first moved. That was in 2013. And so I spent 4 years here at that point, and then I moved away for a couple of years to get my master's degree, and then I moved right back right after finishing that.
You like it there? Yeah, it's a wonderful, vibrant music city. So every time I've been there, it's you just kind of want to stay longer, and it seems like you're gonna maybe find new little spots to check out around, the different areas of the city and stuff. So different little clubs and stuff. Yeah, excellent. Well, let's dive right into your new album. So this is the album with your duo, but it sounds like there's maybe a couple other people joining you as well on some of the tracks. But do we pronounce it Rakish?
That's exactly correct.
Rakish, yeah. So this is like, like all the old British sort of romance novels and stuff. There's the rake and this kind of the dashing fellow that everyone wants, but he's sort of untouchable or something. Is this where you're drawing the inspiration from?
That certainly is its literary connotation. Yeah, we actually we got the initial idea from a tune, a traditional Irish tune that is called Rakish Paddy. That was it was one of our kind of first tunes that we played together in concert together. So that's kind of where it came from initially, and then we were kind of just thinking about how it kind of resonated more so with just the music that we play, and not in you use the word untouchable, and I would like to steer away from that, but just more so in the way that perhaps our music has a little bit of an unconventional touch.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. So this is a new album, and you guys have had a few albums before. What was the inspiration for this particular album?
Well, before this, we had just released one shorter EP with 5 tracks, and we made that EP and recorded it kind of right at the beginning when we were just kind of getting our duo off the ground, and we just basically needed something to represent ourselves when we were playing concerts. So it all kind of happened very quickly with that EP. And with this more full-length album, we really wanted to kind of have more time to kind of explore a larger body of music that we felt like maybe was a little bit more distilled. And yeah, I get distilled is a good word, I think. Like, just we really wanted to take our time with it and really create a body of work that we felt like really represents us and our musical journeys together and apart.
Well, and it's a nice mix of some different sounds. I mean, obviously we hear sort of the Celtic influence on some of the fiddle tunes, and there's some vocal songs as well where you guys are singing, and those to me had a little bit more of maybe some Appalachian or old time sort of feeling. And I understand you were born in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Right? So that's maybe some of your roots there, I suppose we can talk about. But and then, of course, some classical and even a little bit of jazz, I would say. There was a part in, I think it was the Lucky One, where it felt like even a little bit of, something else in there. So it was a nice blend. Tell me a little bit about, you're saying kind of melding your different styles. Tell me about the group and sort of a little bit about your backgrounds and how you guys came together.
Yeah. Conor grew up in the DC area, in Tacoma Park, Maryland, and he grew up, actually, he started on the fiddle as well, but he quickly found the guitar and found his love for guitar. But he grew up playing a lot of traditional Irish music. There's a really big community of that genre around the DC area. So that was kind of his upbringing, I would say, musical upbringing for the most part. He also, I know, studied jazz, I think, a little bit growing up as well. So both of us have definitely had various musical influences along the way. But yeah, I would say Conor mainly draws on those kind of genres. And as for myself, like you said, I grew up in Boone, North Carolina, which is a little town in the Appalachian Mountains. And I started actually on the Bouzouki method. And which was just great. And I had a great teacher as a kid who exposed us to a couple of fiddle tunes along the way. And also I was just kind of started becoming constantly surrounded by various types of fiddle music. It's kind of hard not to be in that area of the world. Mostly old time, actually. Although I never say I studied or really got into playing old time music myself. Although it's something I would love to do, it's still something I've never quite felt like I have done yet. From an early age, actually, I was in sort of a pseudo family band, I would say, and we played a lot of Celtic music together, and that was really a big part of shaping my musical collaborative spirit, I think. And yeah, so that's kind of where I was coming from. And the love for Celtic music kind of came out of that family band trio. As well as just being exposed to, my parents exposed me to a lot of different great Celtic musicians. Along the way, we would go to festivals and stuff every year. And yeah, so those are probably my main influences from a young age. And then, of course, when I moved to Boston to go to NEC, I really kind of dove headfirst into the classical music. And also, another thing that brought me to Boston was this I knew that Boston was a really wonderful place for Irish music. There was a big Irish music community here, and I was excited to sort of see if I could learn more about Irish fiddling by living here.
And did you meet Conor in Boston then, or how did you guys meet?
Yeah, we met through some mutual friends. Conor went to Tufts University, studying, I think, English literature. And speaking of literature, and yeah, we met actually, I think, in our junior year of college at a house party. Some mutual friends introduced us, and we got to talking about how we both play fiddle music. And then we played a couple like sessions. The Irish session scene is like a really big part of the Irish musical community. Yeah, so we kind of played together in some of those informal settings, and then started really playing a lot more together.
It's wonderful when you can find people you can sort of sync up with in a musical way. I mean, we're trained, and you've had this training, to just be able to slip in there and read the sheet music and do all of this in the classical realm, but still, finding those people that we really resonate with. Because, it's very magical. So
totally.
That's
When it's a good
together.
match, it's like so gratifying and wonderful to be a part of that collaboration.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So let's talk a little bit about the album, and just so some of these are traditional tracks. We've got a Johann Sebastian Bach tune, the Jig from the second partita. There's also, I understand, quite a few tunes that you guys wrote or arranged. So tell us a little bit about maybe that process of putting the album together, selecting tunes, and collaborating.
Yeah, as I kind of mentioned, there was a bit, probably like 3 or 4 years in between the time we made the EP. I think maybe 3 years. I think we released the EP in the fall of 2018. So yeah, like couple years there that we after we put that EP out, we were playing a lot together as a duo. So we kind of were able to really build a body of work that kind of spanned across many different kind of genres and stuff, and something that has been at the center of our kind of mission, if you will, is to kind of find ways to bring together our different musical influences in a way that makes sense to us and works for us. So that's kind of how the classical music comes into our repertoire a lot, just because I've spent so much time studying classical music, that I love to kind of bring the classical tunes once in a while into the more Celtic setting. And Conor has this really wonderful way of just being able to learn anything. He learned the Bach by ear, and as he does with pretty much all the classical pieces that we play together, which is just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've heard some various, because it's of course unaccompanied, right?
Yeah.
How it was written by Bach, and then I've heard various people record different solo Bach tunes, whether it's the partitas and sonatas for violin or the cello suites or whatever, and then they'll have their band or their accompanist or whoever come in, and I don't know, it's sometimes it seems to work and sometimes it seems like it's just like excess, but I wanted to just commend you guys, because I felt like how he came in, it felt like it was there before, like it wasn't a distraction, which I have experienced a few times just personally, just probably because I've heard these tunes so many times just on their own. So that's amazing. Yeah. And just figuring out like what to do and what chords there were.
Definitely. Yeah. That's a high compliment. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really fun to just, I think whenever we play any kind of classical music together as a duo, there's this kind of feeling of for me, of just letting go of like how I would think about it in a classical setting, and just really trying to play it as if I were playing a fiddle tune. And I think that kind of enables us to really gel together, and have it sit really well for our duo together. Yeah, I think Conor did a really beautiful job of kind of weaving together some counter melodies, and then also some laying into some more chordal stuff. And we definitely talked a lot about like the chord choices and stuff together as we were arranging that one. But yeah, it was really fun to get to play that as if it were a real jig. Yeah. So the album is a mixture of, I would say, like maybe 4 different sort of categories of music. One is just the traditional tunes that we really are at the heart of Celtic music, and we're at the start of our kind of musical relationship, just playing in sections and just playing those tunes, those traditional tunes. And then there are tunes that we have written that are in that traditional style as well. And they're meant to sound like they're old if possible. And then, yeah, there's a few tracks that have that classical influence. And then there are another couple tracks where we play some songs, original and more traditional songs. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I guess through all of this music, we're like that is kind of sort of a wide range of genre and sound, really, on the album. But hopefully, it kind of hangs together and has a nice variety without seeming too like jarring and all over the place.
I like the variety. I mean, I think it's especially nice to showcase those different styles that your instruments can play in, and the fact that you're playing the same instruments, you're on violin, or if we want to call it fiddle, or, in the moment, maybe it changes itself. But, that's, to me anyway, that feels like a nice common thread. And then you get to see, oh, wow, it can be a fiddle, it can be a violin, it can be anything in between.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So there was a track you were talking about, the Courant, that maybe we want to listen to a little bit, and tell us about that one and how that one came about.
Yeah. This was a tune that I actually came across while I was taking a class on Baroque music at Yale. And I was thumbing through this collection of tunes by Robert Duvizet, French Baroque composer. And I actually got a chance to play this particular Courant with one of my classmates at the time, and really liked the tune and thought it would be fun to kind of work on it in a little bit more of an in-depth and contemporary, if you will, spin. So what we did was we took like what is just on the page. So it was a melody and a figured bass kind of thing underneath that. And we took the opportunity, because it's a Courant in 6/4. We took this opportunity to kind of introduce the melody just as it is, with just a simple figured bass line underneath. So that's like the first time through the tune. And then after that, gradually what we do is we both kind of veer off of what is on the page in different ways. On the fiddle, I try to kind of vary the melody and introduce some more like moving lines that make it a little bit more of a dance-like feel, hopefully. And Conor kind of gradually shifts from that very simple one note at a time bass line to playing like full-on, like more jig style traditional Celtic accompaniment. So during the course of this track, we kind of morph into from a very classical sounding thing to hopefully a more folky kind of sounding rendition of the same tune.
Excellent. This is track 6 from Counting Down the Hours, the Courant. Thanks for sharing that one with us. It totally has that beautiful Baroque poise in the beginning, and then as you guys get a little bit more animated with it, there's definitely a feeling, a little hint that maybe we've left the King's Court and we're now dancing a jig with the villagers. Very nice track, just beautiful work. And I think you'd mentioned earlier before we started rolling that there was a companion track to this one that you wanted to talk about.
So actually, it's the next track on the album. It's called The Waiting Game. And I guess sort of the concept with this it's a set of 2 tunes. One is a jig and one is a reel, and they're both compositions of mine, meant to sound traditional as possible. But these ones kind of are connected to the Courant a little bit, in that we're taking that seed of going from the classical sound to the Celtic sound even farther. So these tracks are meant to blend in sort of into one another almost seamlessly on the album. And basically we're starting with that courant, and then we find ourselves in a real jig. So we kind of jigify the courant, and then we do actually land in a jig, a real life jig. And then from that jig, we kind of go into this more up-tempo reel that's called The Waiting Game. That was a particularly fun tune to write and arrange. When I write fiddle tunes, writing fiddle tunes is quite a task, because there's such a rich body of music that is already out there, that has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, and like those tunes are incredible, and they're like speaking of untouchable, like those tunes are untouchable, you know. So when I or any living tune writer sets out to write music, it's a real challenge to kind of figure out how I can contribute something that is meaningful and kind of like worth it, I guess, worth it to try to add to that incredible body of music that's already out there. So when I write tunes, I'm trying to, you know, make them maybe sound like they have a place in that traditional style, but also I'm trying to figure out ways that I can like expand on the tradition a little bit and create something that is new and really has my voice attached to it, my voice on the instrument attached to it. So I think a lot about tune structure, and I use that as sort of a jumping off point. So this particular reel, The Waiting Game, has 3 parts. It has an A part, a B part, and a C part. And another thing that I think a lot about is key relationships within tunes. Oftentimes the really traditional tunes they really stay in one key area the whole time. That's not always the case. Sometimes they shift from part to part, but I love that the feeling or in the sound when like you go into a new section, like a B part or something, and the keys like totally shifts or whatever. So in this tune, I'm exploring like G basically. So it starts at really G minor kind of sound, and then we kind of, by the third part, we make it into G major, and it sort of has hopefully it's an interesting like progression throughout the tune, just kind of emotionally.
Awesome. And what inspired the title? I know it can be hard to come up with titles when there's no lyrics and stuff, but was there a specific thing? The waiting game?
I was just waiting on a friend. We were like going to go somewhere, and they were late, so I was sitting in my living room just killing time,
writing the tune,
playing the waiting game, writing a tune.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's where it came from, and of course I kind of edited along the way, but
sure,
that was where when the initial tune came about. That's what I was doing. Yeah.
And picking up from where we musically left off with the courant, here is track 7 from Counting Down the Hours, The Waiting Game. Thanks for sharing that one as well. It's a great track, and I love the different changes we go through on that journey. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about the album? It's called Counting Down the Hours, and I assume it's available on all platforms and different places on your website. Tell us a little bit more about where people can find it and listen.
Our duo is called Rakish, and the album we just released in February of 2022. It's called Counting Down the Hours, and you can find it hopefully anywhere you listen to music, whether that be Spotify, or if you really want to support the artists, definitely I would recommend checking out Bandcamp. That's every first Friday of every month. Bandcamp does all proceeds to the artist. So if you pick a day to buy it, that's the day. The first Friday of every month.
That's the day,
nice
yes.
time to buy it. But yeah, you can also check out our website, rakishmusic.com.
Wonderful. And let's move a little bit into just your background. And so your early Suzuki training, and it sounds like you just had this wonderful sort of vibrant scene with your family band and different influences. Was there a specific moment when you decided, I think I want to be a musician. I want to pursue this?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was like one particular moment, but it's just been, I feel like maybe I am a bit of a rare case where it's just, music has been like my thing for just as long as I can remember. So it's almost like I couldn't imagine doing anything else really with my life, like professionally. So yeah, I don't think I had one particular formative moment per se, but more just a collection of one wonderful moment after the next. Getting to grow up around some of like my best friends who also were musicians, fiddle players as well, just was a constant source of like inspiration and just motivation as well. So that was like invaluable to me as a person and as a musician.
It's wonderful that you had that experience of just being seeped in that kind of community, I imagine, and it's so helpful, right, to have that support and encouragement. So
yeah,
definitely wonderful.
My parents definitely exposed me to a lot of really wonderful musicians as well through those festivals that I was mentioning, and definitely taking me to see a lot of live music too, which was always inspiring.
I guess I was looking at it on the map, so I was thinking, have I been through Boone? I've been through a couple different Boones. It's one of those small town names, right?
Yeah.
That you find in different states. But I was like, no, I haven't quite been there, but definitely Asheville, which is relatively close by, I suppose.
Yeah.
And different scenes like that, just, so much music.
Yeah. It's a really great part of the world. I didn't spend too much time in Asheville growing up for whatever reason, but yeah, Asheville actually has a really nice Irish music community as well. I wouldn't say I spent a lot of time there playing in the Irish music community, but yeah.
As far as doing classical music and then going and doing fiddling, how do you organize that kind of mentally, emotionally, technically on your instrument? How do you kind of reconcile, maybe there's a lot of technique that can carry over and then some things that are completely different, right? Just different approaches.
Yeah, definitely. Well, obviously the biggest difference for me between the two is with classical music. A lot of times it's, this is a very obvious statement, but it's like reading music, and with the fiddle, it's never reading music. So that's probably the biggest difference for me. And it just changes the way that I approach rehearsals and learning the music as well. I guess I've gone through several sort of different phases. Like when I was in high school, I also went to an arts, like a music and arts high school. And while I was in high school, I think I kind of got into the classical gear a little bit more, and more of my focus was in the classical realm, and that kind of continued into my first couple years at NEC as well, where the fiddle kind of took the back burner a little bit, while I was just sort of figuring out how to be in classical school, I guess. But I was really eager to meet people and kind of reconnect with the Celtic music scene. So I was really grateful to be able to do that. I met some really lasting friends. As I mentioned about my junior year of college, I kind of got plugged in a little bit more to the Celtic music scene up here. I like to think about practicing a lot, and I find that it's interesting to take my like training in classical music and classical like the practice mindset and sort of apply that to the fiddle stuff as well. It's really gratifying to actually be able to like practice fiddle music once in a while instead of just constantly learning tunes or whatever, because fiddle music it's more common to like be learning new tunes and stuff, and but it's really I feel like I'm lucky to have learned how to practice really well. That's one of my most valued takeaways, I guess, from all my classical training is just like learning how to practice. And I love to apply that to any genre of music, I guess. In terms of like performance, I don't actually feel that differently. I don't feel that I'm drawing on particularly different skills when performing one or the other. I kind of try to approach them in a very similar way, with a similar seriousness and also exploration or something.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I'm mentioning practice, and I think, I have a lot of students and stuff who are always thinking there's some like magic formula, and if they just practice, the right way or something, or they practice the right things, then it's all going to come together. Yeah. And of course, practice is important. So I'm just wondering about, what's your kind of go-to practice regimen, I suppose, or do you have any particular like exercises or approaches that really seem to work for you that you keep coming back to?
That's a good question. I would say I'm not a very pattern-based practicer, unfortunately. Maybe I would like to be better about that, but I find usually when I'm practicing nowadays, I'm learning new music, as opposed to practicing my etudes or what have you. Although when I do have the time, I always come back to practicing etudes, and my favorite etude books are Cavigné. And I really have learned a lot about like shifting and playing higher up on the neck and position work through those exercises. But it's not particularly helpful for the fiddle stuff. It's actually kind of irrelevant for the fiddle stuff, since usually in the fiddle land we stay in first position, with an occasional exception. I think for me, perhaps my most like valued musical like trait for anyone, any musician, is a sense of really good tone and really beautiful sound and color that comes out of your instrument. So I spend a lot of time practicing that and working on that in any piece or type of music that I'm playing. I think a lot about how I'm producing the sound, what kind of sound I want to be producing, and yeah, that definitely goes across all genres, whether I'm practicing classical, fast fiddle music, slow fiddle music, any type of classical music. I'm always thinking about the sound. Yeah, so I guess I do a lot of like thinking about the bow, and something I've been thinking about a lot recently is playing with all the hairs on the bow.
Are you a tilter?
Yeah.
I like to tilt too. Yeah, weaving the phrasing, and yeah, no, I love it. And I think that's maybe like when you mentioned bringing that into the fiddle realm, your tone is just so beautiful, and you have such a nice, just, it's kind of an ease with it, I suppose. That just comes through, you make it sound very easy and beautiful. And there's so many different sounds in fiddle music. Yeah, a lot of times, we're hearing the tunes countless different ways and in countless different sort of qualities. It's very nice to hear that kind of, classical tone without sounding like obviously classical when you're playing a tune. You're able, I think.
Yeah. I just mentioned how like I was using the kind of practice mindset to influence the Celtic music, but one thing I failed to mention was the sense of sort of like you just alluded to it, which is what reminded me, just the sense of like freedom and joy, like overall joy and just exploration that happens in fiddle music that for a long time for me was sort of not present as much in the classical music, that at least the classical music that I was playing. And that's one way that I think that fiddle music for me has really been able to enhance any sort of classical music that I play. Just sort of trying to remember that feeling of freedom, especially in terms of like sound and tone and just like phrasing and kind of direction of the music, and bringing that into the classical stuff. That's been really freeing for me, and really a wonderful kind of way that the fiddle has informed the classical.
That's wonderful. Yeah, that they can help each other, and they don't have to be like these separate little camps, you know.
Yeah.
This is the classical, this is the fiddle.
Yeah.
Can come together. Yeah, I've seen just in my lifetime just the acceptance of sort of the different genres meld a lot more. Like I remember being young and just when Joshua Bell and some of these other folks were starting to explore different styles, there was sort of a little bit of this, I'm not sure about that from the classical camp. And now it just seems kind of second nature. Just, of course, we would try all these different things. Yeah. And I suppose that brings me to my next question, which is, do you have any tips for classical, doesn't have to be necessarily a violinist, but just, bowed string players who might be wanting to get a little bit into fiddle, but, of course, they're used to reading the sheet music, like you said, and maybe what tools did you find particularly helpful to make that leap and sound convincing in these other genres?
Definitely, yeah. I'd say, especially with the traditional Celtic kinds of music, that's really where all I can speak to in terms of other genre. Really, perhaps this is a obvious answer, but really the most important thing is to listen very actively and frequently and a lot to the music that you want to play like and sound like. I am like a total fiddle nerd, so when I want to learn a tune, I will like find my favorite version of that, and I will learn not only the notes of the tune, but I will learn everything that I can possibly learn from like a particular recording. Like bowing, like YouTube is a great resource because you can slow everything down and like actually watch like particular like bowing patterns, which that has been something that I have focused on a lot. I just think it's totally fascinating because every fiddle player has their own like bowing sensibilities, and I have learned so much from kind of honing in on a certain fiddle player's bowing style versus another one or whatever. So I love learning things from YouTube where you can watch and like slow down the bowing and like really do exactly the same bowing and stuff, because I find that it's pretty, at least in my teaching experience, it's fairly easy to teach the left hand in the fiddle style. Like really all you have to know is just a couple like ornaments, and you can just apply those anywhere. But really I think at the heart of the groove and the sound is the bow, and kind of once again coming back to that sort of sound development kind of thought process, and in fiddle music certainly the bowing and the bowing patterns, that's all it is really. So I would say that would be very helpful, and yeah, just listening. Like listening is the most invaluable tool for the fiddle music, because it's always been an oral tradition. Like fiddle music has, I mean, with a few exceptions, of course, it's always been taught by ear, and you learn whoever's version of the tune you're learning it from, and then it just kind of slowly evolves from there. And yeah, I just think that's like a really great, amazing way that music can be passed down from generation to generation and player to player. So that's where I would start.
Wonderful. Yeah, there are so many fiddle books out there, right? But the thing that they mostly lack, they've got the left hand, but yeah, bowings. Where are the bowings?
Yeah.
No one puts bowings in. And I suppose it's because, like what you say, everyone kind of has their different style and maybe where that fiddler was based. There's maybe a regional style of bowing or just that tune. But yeah, it's very hard to take it off the page. So I love your just, let's go back to what it always was, right? Let's go back to listening.
Yeah, and of course, like, there is something to be said from, like, you can of course learn a tune from a music book. There's absolutely, like, that's a wonderful way to learn tunes as well. Like I do that sometimes when I'm learning a tune, as I mentioned. Like, if I'm listening to so and so's version of a tune, I will kind of cross-reference to. There's this really great website. Some people don't like it, but I think it's at least it's a great resource. Maybe not to be taken as gospel, but a website called Percussion that has this incredible catalog of tunes. Pretty much any tune you can think of there'll be at least one version of it on the session. But the nice thing is that there are usually many different versions of a particular tune, and you can kind of look at them. But anyway, once you can learn the basic skeleton of the tune, then you can kind of play around with it and figure out how you want to bow it, and you can look at those different layers, bowing styles, or you can kind of impose your own bowing style. Like, sometimes if there's a particularly awkward tune that I'm learning that has a bunch of string crossings or something, I'll go through and kind of force myself to do okay, I'm gonna slur this particular slurring pattern. I'm just gonna apply that to the whole tune, even if it feels super uncomfortable and I get super backwards. At least I'll feel how it feels, and in certain places maybe it'll feel really good, and then I'll know that I can use that bowing pattern in those spots, but maybe to stay away from it in another particular section or whatever. And that can be a bowing pattern. That could be as simple as playing every note on a separate bow. That kind of very simple bowing pattern, which can actually be harder than you think to kind of implement and stick to it through a whole tune. But I love messing around in that kind of way, where I'm just okay, I'm going to do this bowing pattern through the whole tune, and just really stick with it, and then I'll try something new.
That's I like that. And that's a nice kind of disciplined way to sort of go through. And like you say, you might find, oh, I didn't really like that bowing pattern for most of this, but that one measure that was really awkward before now kind of came together. Okay, so I'm going to keep that there. And then you kind of maybe over time develop a little bit of a compilation of bowings that work for you and make everything kind of gel together eventually.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And of course, with all practicing, that's I love doing that kind of work, and then you have to leave it in the practice room, leave it behind you kind of when you're ready to actually play and be free with the tune in any other, when you're collaborating with someone or when you're playing in a concert or something like that. But putting in that work, it really allows you to have that freedom, and that goes across all, it's the same with classical music. You really have to make sure the guide notes for the shifts or whatever, and then when you're actually performing, you don't have to think about that.
Well, yeah, and you get all that flexibility sort of worked out. So, situations where you miss a bowing or something during a performance, it's you've practiced all the bowings, so you can just kind of easily get yourself back. I mean, there might be that situation, or just in the next tune, you'll be using a different set of bowings that you've already practiced. So yeah, it's kind of going back to the etudes, right? All those the Wolfart etudes or whatever, where they've got all these different bowing patterns and the Kreutzer and stuff. So, well, thank you for all of that. I think that's very helpful, and just the listening aspect. Just so many musicians of all sorts, I suppose, we just maybe don't do enough listening, and that's what we're trying to recreate, right? The sound. Yeah. Are there any particular artists that you kind of just keep coming back to, or?
Yeah. Probably my icons in the Celtic fiddle world would be Liz Carroll and Martin Hayes. They have pretty what I would consider not opposing, maybe that's a strong word, but very disparate styles, different styles. Liz Carroll does a lot of tune writing. She's an incredible tune composer, and just has records and records of tunes that she's written, and they're just all incredible. So if you're looking into getting into tune composition, I just definitely recommend listening to Liz. She has this really interesting bowing style where it's a lot. It's very, very rhythmic style of bowing, which is very much in contrast to what Martin Hayes does, where with pretty much every tune he approaches, which it's, I would say, I mean, it's not that it's not rhythmical, but I definitely say his primary voice is just this like soaring, very melodious kind of way of using the bow. And those two styles are like really different from one another. But I have found myself coming back over and over again to both of those players, just because I admire what they do so much, and I think they each have like this incredible, very, very unique sound, and I admire them a lot.
Yeah, both of them. I'm a little bit more familiar with Martin Hayes as far as having listened to him more, but yeah, both players are wonderful. So yeah, isn't it interesting how we just sort of gravitate towards different sounds and particularly, like you said, kind of on different sides of the spectrum, but then, you know, you can find your balance somewhere in there and make it your own. So
definitely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, what are you looking forward to coming up? Is there just in general or specifically?
Let's see. Well, right now I'm learning the Ravel string quartet for the first time, which is really exciting for me to play with. I have a string quartet called the Rasa String Quartet that's based here in Boston, and we have a couple shows in April that we're playing the Ravel quartet among a lot of other really great music. But anyway, I'm excited about learning the Ravel string quartet. I've been thinking about my bowing and my sounds once again with that piece. And I have mostly I'm just really excited about live music being a thing again, and just being able to just do what I love the most and get to play and perform music for people, music that I love and is really dear to me, for people in real life, which is just such a gift. And Conor and I have a couple shows coming up. We're playing in Connecticut this weekend, and we've got a few things kind of down the road in the spring months.
Ramping back up.
Ramping back up.
Yeah. Well, we all seem to look at the pandemic so negatively. Is there anything that really, I don't know, it was, to me at least, a nice time for reflection in certain ways. And is there anything from these last couple of years of just kind of being shut down and not being able to perform so much that actually was valuable and you kind of want to carry forward?
I think having more time to kind of sit with my instrument at home and just mess around or explore things that I hadn't felt like I had the time to explore previously. I definitely was able to learn a lot of new tunes and do some writing, more writing than I often find like I have the time for. And also just it really, I just keep coming back to this thing of how lucky we are to be able to make music with people who are musicians who inspire us, and just are just a joy to play with. And the pandemic really reminded me that like how lucky I am to get to play music that I love with my friends and people who are really close to me. So that's certainly true with Conor, one of my dear friends, and so many other people. But not to say that I was, I had a very strict COVID bubble, but I was lucky enough that Conor's household was part of my COVID bubble, and it allowed us to make a lot of new music together and just continue that musical project.
Yeah, appreciating those connections that are just so valuable, and carrying that appreciation forward. And well, I wish you guys all the best. Is there anything else you'd like to mention? Just let's definitely go through the websites again.
And one thing that I just forgot to mention is just that how grateful we are to the sort of other musical voices that you did hear on the album. You alluded to those right at the beginning, but on the album we have a guest bass player named Dan Klingsberg, who's just an incredible musician. We're very lucky that he was able and willing to contribute some low notes to our music. So we're very grateful to him, and we're also to Seamus Egan, who is a incredible multi-instrumentalist who produced the album for us, and also features musically on a couple of the tracks.
Wonderful. I hope people will check all of this out and check you guys out. So rakish.com and
Rakishmusic.com. Yeah.
Thank you. Rakishmusic.com. We'll put those in the show notes so people can just click on that as well. And then you have a website as well.
I do. It's my full name, maurashawnscanlin.com.
And then you mentioned your quartet, the Rasa String Quartet. So what's that website as well?
That is rasastringquartet.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom and little tips that I hope people will carry forward into their lives. And I think your mention of just the freedom that you're able to feel with the fiddle music and kind of taking that back into the classical, and it just kind of shows us that, we don't have to be kind of in our little bubbles, do we? Just explore, and it all kind of informs everything else. So thank you for that.
The more you're able to expose yourself to, I think it can only help.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks again to Maura Shawn Scanlin for joining us and sharing her wisdom and inspiration, and just in checking out some of her videos online, performance videos. I just enjoyed her easy, kind of natural stage presence, and I think she would just be a joy to see in person. So if you're in the Boston area, or if you check out her tour calendar, I'm sure you can see when she might even be coming to your region, and I hope you'll go and check out a show. But in the meantime, definitely support her and her new album, Counting Down the Hours, with her band Rakish. That's rakishmusic.com. It's a really nice collection of music. I listened to it on a couple different occasions and found it very hard to find a favorite because they're just all so great and just the playing is top notch. So I hope you enjoy, and it definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat, just wondering, what are they going to pull out next? What kind of sounds and styles and feelings? And I really appreciated that diversity. So again, I'm Laurel Thomsen, and you can find me at laurelthomsen.com. That's LaurelThomsen. I've also been enjoying little hints of the performer in me coming back to life, so to speak. And you can check out my tour calendar. There's nothing beyond sort of the local region in the Central California area right now, but hopefully before too long, I can spread my wings a little bit further and continue to promote this album we released in January, my duo partner and I, Dan Frechette, the After the Fire album that I've been mentioning on the podcast. And we had a couple episodes there where we were sharing some tracks. So it's a little bit different when there's no tour to promote the album, but I'm hoping that maybe later on this year, or definitely next year, we can go further afield and get back to it. In the meantime, of course, you can always get in touch if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, particularly any topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, any guests you'd like me to have and interview. That would be wonderful to get your feedback and ideas for that, and I'm happy to try and make it happen. No guarantees, but anything's possible, I suppose. And you can also check out my website for my blog. If you go to the Violin Geek tab, you'll be able to head to the Violin Geek blog, which is kind of the companion of the podcast. Just some things seem to be better in writing than in audio format. And I have different topics going back to 2007 on there, a lot of educational topics and kind of how-tos and tips and tricks and stuff like that. So if you are a musician, particularly a bowed string player, you might get a lot out of that. And as well, if you need some extra help, you're always welcome to contact me for some lessons or coaching, and you can find all those details on my website. So we have some other interviews coming up in the next couple months, and I'm really excited to keep sharing all of these wonderful creative people with you. And if you enjoyed this episode, I hope you will share it with your friends and spread the word about Maura and her new album. And I also appreciate your ratings and reviews on whatever platform you listen to. It definitely can help the visibility so that others can more easily find the podcast. I hope everyone is doing well out there. These are some interesting times we're living through, but I just keep coming back to music. And when I'm in my practice space or I'm teaching or I'm performing, I'm not thinking about anything other than music, which is Wonderful. It kind of gets us right in the moment. So I hope you're doing a lot of that these days. And I hope you're all taking the time to just take care of yourselves, turn off the devices, and check in with that source of creativity and inspiration that's within us, that's around us. And just making time for that's really important. It makes the world a better place. So until next time, I hope everyone has a wonderful month and happy practicing.